Okay, so you know that scene in The Martian where like Matt Damon's character, he's stranded, right? Those dust storms are like swirling around him and he's yelling for help. It's intense. It really makes you think about how important those cries for help can be in a disaster. But like finding survivors in those situations, it's not just a Hollywood thing, is it?
No, not at all. In the real world, search and rescue teams really depend on what they can see. You know, drones with cameras, thermal imaging, things like that. These tools are really important, but they can only do so much.
And because of that, researchers are asking a really interesting question. What if we could use sound to find people? It's kind of a crazy idea, right? A drone that acts like a superpowered set of ears that can cut through all the noise after a disaster to
Yes.
find where a survivor is.
It's a really cool concept, and the research paper we're looking at today is all about how AI powered drones could do just that. The authors call it AI based drone assisted human rescue. The idea is to give these drones really, really sensitive microphone arrays.
Okay, so instead of just seeing, now these drones are listening. But think about a disaster site. There's noise everywhere. How could AI ever tell the difference between a cry for help and like a building falling down?
That's where it gets interesting. Think about your own ears. They filter out extraneous sounds all the time so you can focus on what you're listening to, right? These AI algorithms, they're made to do the same thing, but way, way better. They use something called convolutional neural networks, or CNNs for short, to look at patterns in sound waves.
CNN, so it's like the AI is learning what a human distress call looks like, but for audio. Is that right?
Exactly. So, like, a human scream usually has a different frequency pattern and energy signature compared to, say, the sound of metal bending. CNNs can tell these little differences apart.
That's incredible. So the AI is analyzing all these sound waves, but how does it know where the sounds are coming from? It's not like a disaster area gives you a map to the survivors.
You're right, and that's where they use another technology called direction of arrival, DOA, signal processing. Basically, the drone uses its different microphones to pinpoint the source of a sound. It's like it makes this 3D sound map that leads rescuers right to the spot.
So wow, rescuers aren't just hearing all that chaos. It's like they've got X-ray hearing to hone in on those calls for help. That changes everything. This is really amazing stuff. It's like we're giving rescuers superpowers to hear,
Yeah.
but I bet real disasters make this tech really hard to use.
Oh, you're right. The paper actually talks about that a lot. Wind, debris, a bunch of people yelling. Those are really hard problems to solve. It's definitely not like just listening for one clear call for help.
So how do they teach the AI to deal with all that? I mean, it's not like there's a library of disaster sounds out there for training these things.
Well, not yet, anyway. That's why they have to constantly be gathering new data and making the AI models better. The more real world sounds they use to teach the AI, the better it gets at filtering out the unimportant stuff and finding those crucial distress signals.
It makes you wonder, like, what does that training even look like? Is it just people listening to hours of reportings? Do they have to, like, make fake disaster sounds?
It's kind of like that, actually. They have entire teams, engineers, and sound experts working on this stuff. They use a mix of real recordings from old disasters plus really detailed simulations. It's this wild combination of sound science, computer science, even a bit of psychology.
Okay, I gotta ask, is this thing like a giant Shazam but for survivors? Like you hold your drone up and it's like playing Help Me by the Trapped Hikers.
I get it. But it's a lot more complicated than Shazam. This isn't about finding a specific song, it's about recognizing patterns of distress in all that noise. And that brings up another interesting point, especially when you start to think about who is making this tech and what it could be used for. Because this is great for search and rescue, but any powerful technology, it can be used in different ways.
That is a really good point. And it makes me think of a company that knows a lot about analyzing data,
Hmm.
Palantir.
Palantir is a fascinating company to talk about in this situation. They've made a name for themselves by analyzing huge, complicated sets of data, and a lot of times it's for the government.
And their CEO, Alex Karp, he's something else, isn't he? His Wikipedia page calls him a socialist billionaire.
That definitely stood out to me too. His philosophy background, combined with the work Palantir does with governments, it makes you think they're thinking hard about what this kind of technology could lead to. And it created a lot of debate. Like in that Reddit thread you mentioned, why is Palantir considered unethical?
Oh yeah, that thread was wild. People have some really strong feelings about Palantir. It all comes back to the question of how technology, especially powerful AI like the sound analysis, gets used.
You're exactly right. And it's a conversation we need to be having now while this is all still being developed, because the future of AI and sound analysis, it's not going to be quiet.
I like that. It's a lot to think about, the technical stuff and the ethics. Why don't we dive deeper into Palantir and what those Redditors were saying right after this? We'll be back in a bit. All right, so we're back and ready to dig deeper into this whole Palantir thing. They're involved in a lot, huh?
That's an understatement. We talked about those government contracts, but they do everything from stopping fraud to analyzing healthcare data. They've really found their niche in taking huge, complicated sets of information and figuring out what it all means.
And that's what makes their potential involvement in this AI sound analysis so interesting, right? It's like we have this tech that can maybe hear people calling for help, but who else is listening in? Who gets access to all that data?
Exactly. That's what everyone's worried about. And it's what that Reddit thread really showed. A lot of users were concerned about someone misusing this tech, especially knowing Palantir's worked with agencies like ICE and on border security.
Which, as we saw in those comments, is something some people have a real problem with. And you can see why those worries would apply here too with sound analysis. Imagine this kind of tech being used to spy on people, not to find someone who's lost, but to hear what someone's whispering when they think no one's listening. It's kind of creepy when you really think about it, right?
It definitely makes you think twice. And it goes back to that big question about technology and if it can ever be truly neutral. Or is it always influenced by the people who created it or the people using it?
Man, that's a tough one. And I don't think there's an easy answer, but it's something we have to keep discussing.
Absolutely. And I think it's pretty interesting that Alex Karp, the CEO, with his background in philosophy, he seems to get that this is a tricky situation. Calling himself a socialist billionaire, it's like, how does that even work? But maybe it shows that he understands having powerful technology means you have to use it responsibly.
Definitely a lot to think about there. We've gone from the pure science of sound to these huge ethical questions about AI, and it's obvious we're just scratching the surface here.
For sure. This technology is still so new, and we're only starting to wrap our heads around what it could mean. Even the research paper says there are still things to figure out, ways to make it better, and rules we need to make about how it's used. But one thing's for sure. Whether it's search and rescue, data analysis, or just how we understand the world around us, it's all going to change because of sound and AI working together.
It's exciting, but a little scary too, right? Thinking about where this could all lead.
It is. But, like we talked about today, the important thing is that we don't stop asking the tough questions. We have to keep talking about this, and we have to be both amazed by these advances and careful with them. Because, like they say, the future hasn't happened yet, and it's up to us to make sure it's a good one.
That's a great point to end on. This deep dive has been a wild ride, from how sound works to what AI means for all of us. And for everyone listening, we hope this got you thinking too. Maybe even do some research of your own. Until next time.